You are locked in a stone cell beneath the greatest arena ever built. Above you, 50,000 Romans just watched your husband die fighting a lion. The crowd is leaving. The torches are dimming. Then you hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. A shadow fills your doorway. It's the gladiator who survived today's massacre. He's covered in blood that isn't his own. A guard unlocks your cell. The gladiator points at you. This isn't a scene from a horror movie. This was Tuesday in the Roman Empire. What I'm about to show you is the part of Roman history they don't teach in schools. The systematic, state-sponsored nightmare that happened after the crowds went home. This isn't speculation. It's documented by Roman writers themselves, and the evidence is literally carved into the walls beneath the Colosseum. If you stay until the end, you'll never look at ancient Rome the same way again. Hollywood has been lying to you about gladiators for decades. Gladiator, Spartacus. These films show you the blood and the combat, the honor and rebellion. What they don't show you is what happened in the hours after the games ended, when the public spectacle transformed into something far more sinister. I'm talking about a system so disturbing that modern historians created a new Latin term to describe it: Victoria Carnalis, the carnal victory. Now, the Romans themselves never called it that, because to them it wasn't even remarkable enough to need a special name. It was just normal. Here's what we know for certain. Roman writers like Martial, Juvenal, and Seneca documented a world where conquered women were warehoused beneath arenas and distributed as prizes. Not metaphorically, literally handed out like rations to gladiators who performed well. The Roman state, the government itself, operated this system with the same bureaucratic efficiency they used to build aqueducts and roads. Think about that. The same civilization that gave us concrete and representative government also perfected the industrialization of sexual violence. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something. Look at the like button right now. If you believe hidden history deserves to be exposed, even when it's uncomfortable, hit that button and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, because this story isn't just about Rome. It's about what empires do when no one's looking. Now, let's descend into the Hypogeum. To understand what happened in those underground chambers, you have to first understand how Rome turned human beings into inventory. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic dehumanization on an industrial scale, and it started the moment Roman legions conquered new territory. When Rome crushed a rebellion in Gaul or annihilated a city in Judea, they didn't just win a battle. They processed an entire population. It was like a factory assembly line for human suffering, men of military age, sent to die in mines or arenas. Children, sold to slave markets across the empire. Women, designated as captiva, war prizes belonging to the state. Here's where it gets truly chilling. Under Roman law, these people weren't legally human anymore. They were classified as resque, things, property. The same legal category as furniture or livestock. A conquered woman had no more rights than a chair. You could do anything to her, and it wasn't even technically a crime, because you can't commit a crime against an object. But Rome didn't just dehumanize people through law, they dehumanized them through spectacle. The games weren't just entertainment, they were political theatre designed to psychologically dominate both the conquered and Rome's own citizens. When you watched a captured Germanic chieftain fight a lion, you weren't just seeing a man die, you were watching Rome demonstrate what happens to anyone who defies the empire. And during the midday lull, when the elite left for lunch, that's when things got truly sadistic. Historians call these fatal charades mythological reenactments, where condemned prisoners were forced to act out famous myths, except the deaths were real. The poet Martial, writing in the 1st century AD, describes these scenes with disturbing casualness, like he's reviewing a restaurant. He writes about a prisoner dressed as Orpheus, the legendary musician who could charm any creature with his song. They led him into the arena with a lyre, released a bear. Martial notes, almost disappointed, that this time the music didn't work, as the bear mauled the man to death while 50,000 people ate honeyed dates. In another passage, and I'm warning you, this is deeply disturbing, Martial describes a woman forced to reenact the myth of Pasiphae, who mated with a sacred bull. For this prisoner, it meant being publicly assaulted by an animal in front of thousands of spectators until she died from her injuries. Read that again. The Roman state designed a system where human beings were raped to death by animals as lunchtime entertainment. This wasn't the sick fantasy of one mad emperor. This was decades of standard operating procedure. Senators brought their children to watch. The events were advertised on walls throughout the city. Vendors sold snacks. Martial himself notes that, whatever myth tells us, the arena makes real. But here's the thing that should terrify you. He's writing this as a compliment. He's praising the efficiency of the system. This was the environment, this industrialized bureaucratic machinery of cruelty that also processed conquered women into the reward system for gladiators. Now, let's talk about the men who received these rewards. Gladiators existed in a bizarre contradiction that Rome never fully resolved. They were simultaneously the lowest and highest members of society, slaves with less legal status than a dog, but celebrities whose faces appeared on mosaics and whose names were graffitied on walls by adoring fans. Women of the aristocracy were obsessed with them. Ancient graffiti from Pompeii calls one gladiator the sigh of the girls and another the glory of the ladies. There are documented cases of noblewomen sneaking into gladiator barracks, paying off guards for private encounters. The gladiator Sergius apparently had affairs with multiple married patrician women, causing enormous scandals. Even stranger, their bodily fluids were commodified. Gladiator sweat was collected after fights, mixed with olive oil, and sold as an aphrodisiac and beauty treatment. Think about that level of celebrity worship. These are enslaved men whose perspiration is being bottled and marketed to the upper classes. But Rome lived in constant terror of these men. The Spartacus rebellion, which happened in 73 BC, was burned into Roman cultural memory. 78 gladiators had escaped, raised an army of 70,000, and nearly brought Rome to its knees. For 2 years, they humiliated legion after legion. When Rome finally crushed them, they crucified 6,000 survivors along the Appian Way, one body every 40 meters for 200 kilometers. A forest of crosses stretching from Rome to Capua. That trauma never left the Roman psyche. Every time a gladiator picked up a sword, every lanista who ran a gladiator school, every spectator in the stands, they all remembered that these men had once come terrifyingly close to burning Rome to the ground. So how do you control incredibly dangerous, incredibly valuable men who have legitimate grievances and the combat skills to act on them? You use a combination of brutal punishment and calculated rewards. Extra food rations, prize money, freedom after enough victories. But the sources hint at something else, something more primal: access to conquered women. The documentation here is frustratingly scattered. Roman writers mention it in passing, like it's too obvious to explain in detail. But when you piece together references from Martial, Juvenal, and later sources, a pattern emerges. After a particularly impressive victory, particularly during the major games funded by the emperor or wealthy senators, gladiators who survived and fought well were given what ancient sources vaguely refer to as privileges of the victor. Modern historians, reading between the lines and cross-referencing with what we know about military rewards and slave management, believe this often meant access to female captives held beneath the arena. The process appears to have been chillingly bureaucratic. The gladiator would be brought down into the hypogeum, the vast underground network beneath the arena floor, still wearing his armor, still covered in the blood and sand of the arena. A ludus official or an arena administrator would act as an escort. They'd walk through tunnels lit by oil lamps, past the animal cages and the mechanical lifts, until they reached a specific section of holding cells. These weren't general prison cells. Archaeological evidence from various amphitheatres across the empire, Capua, Pompeii, even beneath the Colosseum itself, reveals small chambers with distinctive features: stone benches, iron rings anchored into walls at waist height and near the floor, doors that lock from the outside. Some rooms show evidence of chains permanently mounted to the architecture. The women held in these cells were called captivae damnati, condemned war captives. They'd already been processed through Rome's bureaucracy of conquest. Their names were recorded in ledgers by officials called